Hello, I'm Corey Hello, and welcome to another episode of Critamation, where I review animated TV shows and films. As always, I do not own any of these films or shows. They are properties of their respected owners. Our first topic for the week is the 2022 SpongeBob episode, Kuarantine Krabs. The episode begins with a health inspector locking down the Krusty Krab and keeping everyone in on account of the place assumingly being affected with the clam flu. After SpongeBob sneezes, he's accused of being a carrier and is locked in the freezer by the suggestion of Mr. Krabs, who did the same thing during his Navy days. Eventually, Mr. Krabs becomes so paranoid that he locks everyone else but him in the freezer as well. This consists of Patrick, Squidward, Mrs. Puff, and Pearl. After discovering no one in the freezer is sick, they decide to give Mr. Krabs a taste of his own medicine and lock him in the freezer. During the struggle, everyone becomes sick with fictional flus like moldy measles and dust bunny bronchitis. When the health inspector comes back to check on them, he becomes so scared that he has them quarantined at the Chum Bucket, as it's the only place in Bikini Bottom that no one would dare go to anyway. One thing you should know about this episode is that it was originally intended to be released in 2020, but got delayed on account of the similarities that the episode had to the COVID-19 pandemic. And frankly, I was very disturbed when I finally saw this episode. It was an over-exaggeration of the fears and conflicts we went through during the pandemic. Anyone who appeared healthy would possibly be a carrier regardless. I would not recommend this episode to anyone, as it is distasteful to those who ended up having to quarantine during the pandemic. I would consider this one of the worst SpongeBob episodes in recent years. Our next segment is the Tiny Toons episode, Feilds of Honey. This episode focuses on one of the main characters, Babs Bunny, being depressed that none of her mentors at Acme University are female Looney Tunes. After going into the school's vault with fellow classmates Buster, Bunny, and Plucky Duck to settle an argument on who is a better mentor, Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck, the vault keeper shows her some cartoons starring a female cartoon character named Honey, who was a co-star to early Warner Brothers character Bosco, both who went into obscurity after the creation of Porky Pig. A mysterious voice from nowhere then tells Babs to create a movie theater where they would show Honey's old cartoons. Through trial and error, including tricking rich kid Montana Max into giving her money to fund the theater, to advertising through television and various parodies, Babs is able to get the theater open and shows the cartoons, which prove to be successful. One of the people in the audience later reveals to be Honey herself, who, after years of not having anyone laugh at her cartoons, has grown old, as laughter is what keeps tunes young. The laughter from the audience allows her to regain her youth. Before the cartoon ends, it is revealed that the mysterious voice, as well as the vault keeper, is none other than Bosco. The two reunite, and the cartoon ends with them walking into the moonlit night. While the episode is a riff off of Field of Dreams from 1989, One thing I should point out is that the depiction of Bosco and Honey is actually inaccurate. These two are actually racial stereotypes of people of color and only had a few cartoons, because as with this episode's depiction of them, Porky Pig led to their cancellation. However, I should also note that the redesigns, which gave them more canine appearances, do reflect how the finalized designs of the Animaniacs characters, the Warner siblings, would eventually be. Recently, I found an article that talks about this episode on Decider, and it went in depth to how representation actually is done in this early 90s cartoon. The writer, Brett White, discusses how Babs feels about the lack of representation through how all the old Warner Brothers cartoon characters are mostly males. But when she sees Honey's cartoons, she immediately identifies with her and how her type of humor is similar to her own, and is immediately thinking, wow, she's a lot like I am. Being able to identify with someone you see on screen is a big deal and shows that representation matters. I can relate to this because until a few years ago, I saw pretty much no one on screen who had autism, especially in animation. All I had was Rain Man, and that was very, very disrespectful to people on the spectrum. I'll include a link to the article in the description below for further reading if you're interested. The episode itself won an Annie Award for Best Music Composition, and I would recommend this episode to longtime fans of the Tiny Toons franchise looking for something that, while altered to be politically correct, does make a reference to the humble beginnings of the Warner Brothers Studios, showcasing some early but very obscure stars that would set the stage for what would come. Our last topic for the week is entitled Cats Don't Dance. This obscure movie from 1997 was directed by the same guy who would go on to do The Emperor's New Groove. The film centers around Danny the cat, who arrives in Hollywood and is eager to get his starring role in a film. But after meeting the supporting cast of characters, including Sawyer the secretary cat, who becomes his love interest, he learns from studio mascot Woolly Mammoth, the elephant, that animals have been typecasted for supporting to many minor roles in film. Danny then decides to recruit the other animals to help him get them an audition for LB Mammoth, the studio head, to show them that they have what it takes to be major stars. This, however, attracts the attention of Dollar Dimple, who's basically a bratty parody of Shirley Temple, a child star from that era. She then sets Danny up to fail at the audition, and the animals are then fired and left jobless. Danny has at this point lost all hope, but then decides to try one last time. With the help of his sidekick, Pudge the Penguin, they decide to recruit the supporting cast to put on a big performance after the premiere of Dollar Dimple's new film. Despite some resistance from Dollar's butler Max, Danny is able to get the other animals to help out after giving an inspiring speech about, despite being seen as outcasts, they haven't forgotten the feeling they get when they perform. During the performance, Dollar tries to sabotage it, but instead ends up making it look way better. At the end, she accidentally reveals that she sabotaged the audition at the studio and is then put out of a job. Danny and the other animals then go on to be stars in major motion pictures, and in the film at a very happy note. This film has a lot to unpack. For starters, the movie takes place in the 1930s, during the golden age of Hollywood. As such, we see many references to Hollywood films and actors like Lewis and Hardy and Clark Gable, as well as The Wizard of Oz and King Kong. But one of the big things that stick out to me is how the animals' roles are portrayed. After taking a class on Project City about being inclusive in animation, I learned that people tend to try to code non-human characters on which ethnic groups they might be representing. And considering the time the film takes place, these animals having stereotype roles kind of harkens back to how minorities were restricted to roles that were offensive, such as the blackface stereotype and the yellow death that we have seen with people of color and Asian Americans. And while it is subtle, looking at it as an adult, it adds to the context of the film and how the animals are basically minorities compared to how most of the human characters are Caucasian. The music and choreography of the film is definitely a tribute to the golden age of Hollywood, especially the MGM film starring Gene Kelly, who was known for pictures like Singing in the Rain and Anchors Aweigh. In fact, he was a consultant on the film, and it was dedicated in his memory as he died near the end of production. I would recommend this movie to Hollywood fans who are into the old classic films, but also like on how the film is kind of a satire of how Hollywood standards were seen as glamorous when up-and-coming actors are then hit with the harsh reality that happens behind the scene. And while I think kids may not understand the references to old Hollywood, there's enough information to definitely tell them the main idea of what's going on in the themes of this film. Thanks for tuning in to Critimation. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow me on Twitter. I'm open to suggestions, and I will see you next time.